Chapter 1. The Man Who Waited 12 Years. Boston wakes up differently depending on the kind of man you are. For most people, morning means rushing, noise, coffee clutched in tired hands. For Maxwell Thornton, it is silence, precise, deliberate silence. The kind of silence only a man who has outgrown chaos could command. Inside his penthouse, overlooking the harbor, Maxwell stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, hands clasped behind his back, watching the first streaks of red light scatter across the Atlantic. The city was still asleep, unaware that its most quietly influential man had already been up for 3 hours. His reflection in the glass looked exactly the way Boston whispered about him. Tall, controlled, impossibly calm. A man people respected, feared, or both. But his eyes, cold steel gray, gave away the truth. They belonged to someone who had rebuilt himself from the ashes of betrayal. A betrayal that was exactly 12 years old today. He exhaled once, a slow, steady breath. The kind of breath taken by a man who remembers everything. Footsteps approached behind him. "Sir," said his assistant, Harper, a slim woman in her 40s with sharp intelligence etched into every movement. She held a tablet to her chest. "Your 9 a.m. meeting with the Providence investors is confirmed. They're requesting—" "Move it," Maxwell said quietly. Harper paused. "Move to when, sir?" "Next week. I'm not dealing with them today." Harper frowned. "Of course. May I ask?" "No," she nodded. She knew better than to pry. She left the room as silently as she entered. Maxwell stayed at the window another long moment, letting the morning light wash the bitterness out of his mind. Or trying to. Today was not about investors, not about business, not even about the empire he built after losing everything that mattered. Today was the day everything had started. The day he walked into his own home and had his world carved open with a kitchen knife no one else seemed to notice. He blinked once, slowly, and allowed himself to remember. 12 years ago, his home had smelled of wine and expensive rose petals. The scent had irritated him. Diane hated roses. She always said they were predictable. The irony stung. He remembered pushing open the bedroom door, the half-open window letting in the city air. The buttons of a man's shirt scattered across the carpet. His wife's laugh, the kind he hadn't heard in years. And then Bryant's voice. Bryant Reynolds, Maxwell's closest friend, his business partner, his brother in everything but blood, the man he trusted most, the man who was inside Maxwell's wife when Maxwell walked in. He remembered the sound Diane made when she realized she was caught, half gasp, half irritation, like he had interrupted her manicure, not their marriage. Bryant stammered, clutching the sheets. Maxwell stared at them both, silent, unmoving, controlled even then. "Maxwell, please," Bryant began. Maxwell raised a single hand. No, that was all he said. No shouting, no violence, no wild reaction. He simply walked out. That was the day the world learned who Maxwell Thornton really was. Not a man who breaks, a man who plans, a man who waits. Back in the present, Maxwell moved from the window to his kitchen, pouring himself a cup of black coffee. No cream, no sugar, nothing unnecessary. On the marble island lay a single framed photograph. Maxwell, 28, smiling, holding his newborn son. Liam's tiny hand had been wrapped around Maxwell's thumb. His expression softened, barely. Liam, his one anchor, the one person he never allowed the anger to touch. He took the photo, stood there for a moment, then placed it back down with the care of a man handling something sacred. The divorce trial had been brutal. Diana tried to paint him as cold and unfit. Bryant had tried to hide behind expensive lawyers and crocodile tears. But Maxwell? He walked into court with composure that unnerved everyone, including the judge. He didn't shout. He didn't smear. He didn't rage. He simply told the truth. Clearly, precisely, with the quiet dignity of a man who had already buried the marriage emotionally. And in the end, the judge had said a line Maxwell still remembered. "Mr. Thornton may be reserved, but he is steady. He is reliable. He is the parent this child needs." Primary custody went to Maxwell. Diane remarried Bryant 6 months after the ink dried on the divorce papers. Maxwell shook his head once. pushing the memory away. Not because it hurt, those wounds had scarred over long ago, but because it distracted from what he had become since. He had not spent 12 years nursing pain. He had spent 12 years building a plan. The long game. Cold, patient, methodical. A strategy so slow and invisible that neither Diane or Bryant had noticed a single string tightening around their lives. They were too busy celebrating their little victory, marrying each other, flaunting their relationship, spending money they didn't earn, pretending they had won. They had no idea that Maxwell had begun dismantling their world piece by piece. Subtly, quietly, without ever raising his voice. The first step was distance. He did not show anger. He did not pursue them. He did not retaliate openly. He simply vanished from their daily lives, except where Liam was concerned. The second step, rebuilding. He poured his entire being into his company, expanding it, refining it, turning it into a giant that overshadowed every other firm in Boston. He became the man investors whispered about, the man boards feared disappointing, the man journalists could never quite figure out. And the third step, patience. He watched Bryant's career rise, fast, flashy, brittle. He watched Diane spend money as if it grew on trees. He watched their egos inflate, all while quietly preparing the final move. A move he would make only when the moment was perfect. 12 years is a long time to wait for revenge. But Maxwell Thornton was built for long games. He finished his coffee, placed the cup in the sink, and straightened the cuffs of his custom-tailored suit. Harper re-entered. "Your car is ready, sir." He nodded. "Good. Anything else you need?" Maxwell took one last look at the city, his city, a kingdom he built from ruin. "No," he said. "Everything I need is already in motion." Harper bowed her head respectfully and left. Maxwell walked through his penthouse, his footsteps quiet, controlled, echoing the man himself. Every movement precise, every breath measured, every thought sharpened. For 12 years, he had waited. For 12 years, he had planned. For 12 years, he had crafted a strategy that would shatter the two people who once shattered him. And today, though no one else knew it, the first piece was about to fall. Chapter 2. Pieces on the board. The quiet hum of the private elevator filled the underground garage as the chrome doors slid open. Maxwell stepped out, coat draped over his arm, the collar of his shirt still crisp even at midnight. The garage was empty except for a single dark SUV parked in the corner, its tinted window lowered just an inch. A voice drifted out. "You're late." Maxwell's expression didn't shift, not even a flicker. "Roman." The passenger door opened. Roman Vargas stepped out, broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed, dressed in a dark leather jacket that had several things Maxwell didn't ask about. Roman was the kind of man you hired when you needed something done quietly, permanently, or both. Where Maxwell was restrained, Roman was dangerous. "You got something for me?" Maxwell asked. Roman smirked. "I always do." They walked toward a dimly lit maintenance corridor, cameras conveniently offline. Roman handed over a thick folder, edges slightly bent as though it had been through places most folders didn't survive. "Bryant's ego has officially hit the stratosphere," Roman said. "You said he'd rise fast and crash faster. Well, he's flying high enough to forget gravity exists." Maxwell flipped open the folder as they walked. Photos, documents, screenshots of messages, bank routing numbers, and a picture of Bryant laughing loudly in some upscale bar, drink in hand, arm around a woman who was definitely not Diane. "Her name's Talia," Roman continued. "Lives in Chicago. Expensive taste. Even more expensive expectations." Maxwell examined the photo with mild interest. He always liked complications. "You mean stupidity," Roman corrected with a snort. "He's been flying out to see her every other weekend. Private jet, luxury suites, all charged to his hedge fund's corporate card." Maxwell closed the folder. "Good." Roman raised an eyebrow. "Good? You want more dirt? Because I can get more. I can get pictures, recordings, hell. I can get no." Maxwell slipped the folder under his arm. "This is enough. For now." Roman studied him a moment. "You ever going to tell me why you're playing this 12-year chess match? Most men would have nailed these people to the wall by now." "They aren't most men," Maxwell said evenly. "And I'm not most men either." Roman let out a low whistle. You're colder than the ocean in January. Maxwell stopped walking. What about Diane? Roman pulled another envelope from his jacket. Your ex-wife is enjoying life. If you call burning cash enjoying. Luxury spa memberships, designer handbags, personal trainers, charity galas where she donates more than she has. She's living like she's married to a king. Maxwell's voice remained neutral. She's married to a fraud. Yeah, Roman smirked, but he's not bad at faking the crown. Not yet. Maxwell opened the envelope. Pictures of Diane stepping out of boutiques with armfuls of bags, sipping cocktails at rooftop lounges, flashing jewelry that Maxwell knew she didn't buy honestly. Roman folded his arms. You want me to keep tracking her? Yes, Maxwell said. She makes mistakes when she feels secure. I want to know every misstep. That kind of tracking costs. Maxwell gave him a level look. Roman nodded and dropped the subject. They walked out into the open garage, their footsteps echoing. Anything else? Roman asked. Yes, Maxwell said, slipping the folders into his briefcase. The accounts. Roman grinned and pulled a small USB drive from his pocket. Offshore. 3 different jurisdictions, all hidden under shell corporations so thin a breeze could blow them over. The man thinks he's clever. He's reckless. Maxwell corrected. Clever requires foresight. Roman chuckled. Damn. Remind me never to piss you off. Maxwell didn't bother responding. Later that morning, Maxwell sat in his office, an expansive corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows and a desk made of black walnut, so polished it reflected the city skyline like a mirror. He didn't sit behind it often. He preferred standing, pacing, thinking. Today he stood by the window, holding the same USB Roman had given him. Harper knocked lightly. Sir, the Montgomery representatives are here. Send them in, Maxwell said. Moments later, Franklin Montgomery's son, Elliot, and their real estate advisor, Caroline, entered. Both were impeccably dressed, calm, and very aware they were in the presence of someone who didn't waste time. Elliot extended a hand. Mr. Thornton, thank you for seeing us. Maxwell shook at once. Let's get to the point. Caroline opened her portfolio. We're considering expanding the family portfolio. Hotels, specifically. There's a chain we're evaluating, Delancey Hotels. Maxwell kept his expression unreadable. A valuable asset. Strategic locations. Strong branding. Elliot nodded. You've worked with them before, haven't you? I've consulted, Maxwell said carefully, turning slightly toward the window to hide the faintest hint of a smirk. Consulted. Orchestrated. Influenced. Roman had fed him months of inside intel about the chain. About weak points. About who could be pressured. Who could be bought. Who could be nudged towards selling. The Montgomerys thought they were approaching him. In reality, Maxwell had been steering them here from far away. The chain's value is stable, Maxwell continued coolly, but its management could improve. Caroline leaned forward. Do you recommend acquiring them? Maxwell paused just long enough to look thoughtful. Yes, their strongest property is their Boston flagship hotel. If you own that, the rest follows. Elliot exchanged a look with Caroline. We'll make an offer. Maxwell nodded once. Good. He watched them gather their things, satisfaction tucked behind his calm exterior. This move wasn't about hotels. It was about who owned those hotels and the financial webs tangled around them. Bryant was tied to Delancey's hedge fund investments. If the Montgomerys bought the hotels, they would become part of that ecosystem. A giant in the world Bryant thought he controlled. All Maxwell had to do was tilt the board. Let gravity handle the rest. After the Montgomerys left, Harper slipped inside with a new document. Sir, the shell companies you asked about, the acquisitions are complete. You now have quiet, partial influence over Reynolds Capital's voting structure. Maxwell took the papers without looking up. Good. It's all completely untraceable, she added. Even if someone tried, no one will. Maxwell set the documents down. But thank you. She hesitated. Anything else you need? No, he said. This is enough for now. Harper nodded and left. Maxwell sat, hands clasped, staring at the city as the rain began tapping against the windows. Everything was aligning. Slowly, quietly, without anyone realizing the strings were tightening around them. Roman gathered intel. Maxwell positioned assets. The Montgomerys moved exactly where he guided them. A slow tightening, a quiet orchestration, a trap forming piece by piece, step by step. Not rushed, not loud, just patient, just inevitable. Maxwell closed his eyes. The pieces were on the board, and every single one of them was moving exactly how he wanted. Chapter 3, Liam's Future, Diane's Fury. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the top floor of Maxwell's penthouse. He was in the middle of reviewing a new series of acquisition reports when the door swung open and Liam burst in. Dad, you're not going to believe this, Liam said, breath slightly short from excitement. Maxwell looked up from the papers, lifting one eyebrow. You're smiling so hard it looks painful. Sit before your face collapses. Liam laughed, the same warm, unrestrained laugh Maxwell had heard since his son was a child. He sat opposite Maxwell, bouncing his knee restlessly. Okay, Liam said, inhaling deeply. I'm just going to say it. Lexi and I are engaged. There it was. A simple announcement. Yet something heavy and satisfying settled in Maxwell's chest. He placed the papers down. Congratulations, he said, offering a rare, genuine smile. She makes you happy. That's all I've ever wanted. Liam exhaled, relieved. I thought you'd be shocked. You're 26, Maxwell replied. Old enough to choose your path. Old enough to choose wisely. Liam laughed again, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, well, I didn't choose all of it. What do you mean? They want to host the wedding at one of their hotels. The Montgomery family bought the Delancey chain. Maxwell's fingers stilled. Did they now? Yeah, Liam grinned. Lexi's dad said it just fell into place. They got a great price on it. Maxwell nodded slowly, hiding the satisfaction warming his expression. Good choice. Their flagship property is beautiful. Lexi said the same thing. They want to host a rehearsal dinner there, too. Maxwell leaned back in his chair. If that's what you want, I support it. Liam looked grateful. It means a lot that you're cool with everything. I know weddings can be chaotic. Maxwell supplied. A nightmare. Liam corrected with a grin. Maxwell chuckled. Fair enough. Liam's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and groaned. It's Mom. She wants to talk about the engagement, and whenever she adds quotes in her texts, it means she's already mad. Maxwell didn't sigh, but his eyes narrowed slightly. She'll want to make it about her. Yeah, Liam admitted. But you're coming to dinner at her place tomorrow, right? We're all supposed to meet. She said it's important. Maxwell straightened the papers on his desk. I'll be there. Liam hesitated. Dad, don't let her get to you. Maxwell met his son's gaze. I won't. You focus on planning your future. Let me handle the past. Liam nodded quietly, appreciative. Then he stood and hugged his father tightly. Maxwell returned the gesture, briefly, but sincerely. Go, Maxwell said. Tell Lexi I said congratulations. Liam grinned and left the penthouse, still buzzing with excitement. When the elevator doors closed, Maxwell's expression slowly shifted back into something colder, more calculated. The Montgomerys purchasing Delancey wasn't chance. It was the board reacting to the shifts he'd created. Bryant wouldn't see the implications until it was too late. Maxwell almost allowed himself the smallest smirk. The next evening, Maxwell arrived at Diane's home, an extravagant suburban mansion built with money neither she nor Bryant earned honestly. A Mercedes was parked crookedly on the driveway, and music thumped distantly from inside. He rang the doorbell. Diane swung open the door, wearing a silk blouse too bright for the occasion and a smile too sharp to be genuine. Well, she said. Look who finally decided to show up. Maxwell stepped inside without reacting. Where's Liam? In the backyard with Lexi, Diane said, flicking her hair. The Montgomerys are here. They insisted on coming over early. Of course they adore me. Maxwell bit back a laugh. I'm sure they do. Diane's eyes narrowed as she caught the tone. Don't start. I didn't say anything. You never have to, she snapped. It's the look. Maxwell ignored her entirely and walked toward the back patio, where voices drifted through the open, sliding doors. The Montgomerys sat on plush outdoor furniture, sipping wine. Franklin Montgomery himself stood near the grill, flipping vegetables with the confidence of a man who ran billion-dollar deals but still insisted he knew how to cook. "Maxwell," Franklin called out warmly. "Good to see you." "Franklin," Maxwell greeted, shaking his hand. "Congratulations on the acquisition." "Ah," Franklin laughed. "Word travels fast." It was a strategic move. Maxwell's lips tightened just a fraction. "Indeed." Liam rose from his seat beside Lexi and rushed over. "Dad!" Lexi stood as well, smiling. "Hi, Mr. Thornton." "Lexi," Maxwell said, nodding courteously. "Congratulations." "Thank you." She beamed. Diane appeared behind them, clapping her hands loudly. "Everyone, since we're all here, let's talk about the wedding arrangements." Franklin blinked. "We haven't even eaten yet." But Diane was already in motion. "I think," she announced, "that the mother of the groom should play a central role in planning this wedding." Maxwell's jaw ticked slightly. Liam sighed under his breath, muttering, "Here we go." Diane pointed a manicured finger at Maxwell. "You are welcome to attend, of course. But this is our event. Liam grew up with me, not you." The entire patio fell silent. Even the music from inside seemed to freeze. Lexi's eyes widened. Liam went pale. Franklin and his wife exchanged glances. Maxwell simply folded his hands behind his back and said, "Liam grew up with both of us." Diane scoffed, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Please, you are always too busy playing Mr. Important Businessman." Liam stood abruptly. "Mom, that's not fair." "It's true," she insisted. "You lived with me. I lived with Dad." Liam snapped, voice rising for the first time in years. "The court gave him custody." Diane froze. Everyone else did too. Maxwell placed a calming hand on Liam's shoulder. "No need to raise your voice." Liam swallowed hard and nodded. Diane tried again, her voice trembling with irritation. Well, I was there for all the important things." Maxwell tilted his head. "Which ones?" Her face flushed. "Don't talk to me like that." "I'm asking a question," he said mildly. She sputtered, then pivoted. "The point is, Liam is my son, and I deserve respect tonight." Liam sighed. "You're making this about you again." Lexi stepped closer to him, taking his hand gently. "We just want everyone to get along." Diane ignored her. She marched right up to Maxwell, jabbing a finger toward his chest. "Don't you dare think you're going to swoop in and act like the perfect father now that everything's going well for him." Maxwell didn't flinch. "I have always been his father. You don't get to rewrite history because it's convenient." Her lips trembled with fury. Franklin cleared his throat. "Let's calm down, everyone." Diane drew in a shaky breath. Fine. Whatever. The wedding will be held at the Montgomery's new hotel. It's elegant and expensive, and it will remind everyone that Liam is my son, raised properly." Maxwell's expression smoothed into something unreadable. "Yes," he said softly. "It will." Diane stared at him suspiciously. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," Maxwell replied smoothly. "I'm simply agreeing." Her frustration deepened, but Maxwell was already turning away, greeting another guest with civility that made Diane grind her teeth. Liam leaned in to whisper, "Dad, thank you for not fighting." Maxwell gave the smallest smile. "Fight? No, there's nothing to fight. This is your future. Let her say what she wants." Inside, though, Maxwell was already 3 moves ahead. He didn't need to win this argument. He'd already won the board. Chapter 4, Rehearsal Dinner Tension. The Montgomery estate looked more like a private kingdom than a family residence. Acres of manicured gardens rolled outward like emerald rivers, dotted with lantern-lit paths and marble sculptures imported from Italy. Strings of warm lights draped across the courtyard as servers dressed in white drifted silently between clusters of guests. Under that glowing canopy, the rehearsal dinner had the air of something timeless, old wealth, quiet power, the kind of setting where whispers carried farther than voices. Maxwell Thornton stepped out of the town car, buttoning his charcoal jacket, posture straight and unhurried. He had attended thousands of high-profile events over the years, but tonight was different. Tonight, he wasn't here as the feared businessman, the calculating strategist, the man whose rivals whispered about like a ghost at their board meetings. Tonight, he was simply Liam's father. He scanned the crowd and spotted Liam immediately, laughing with Lexi near the fountain. They looked happy, genuinely, brightly happy. It softened something in Maxwell's chest, until he heard her voice. "Oh, look," Diane said loudly, lifting her champagne flute as if making an announcement. "The other parent has arrived." A few heads turned. Not many. Most people here knew decorum, but enough to draw attention. Maxwell didn't react. Diane always expected a reaction. Tonight, she would get none. She was dressed in a glittering navy gown, her blonde hair styled with practiced elegance. Aging had barely touched her face. Money and vanity had ensured that, but bitterness had carved its own shadows behind her eyes. Bryant stood beside her, stiff, his tie slightly crooked, his eyes already glassy from drinking. Diane linked her arm possessively with Bryant's as she approached Maxwell with a sugary smile. "So," she said, drawing out the word, "have you heard the big decision yet?" Maxwell raised an eyebrow. "About Liam walking down the aisle," Diane said with exaggerated excitement. "He wants Bryant to do it. Isn't that wonderful?" Bryant puffed up a little, tried to look paternal, authoritative, anything but the insecure man Maxwell had always known him to be. Maxwell's expression didn't change. "Did Liam tell you that?" Diane waved a dismissive hand. "Details, Maxwell. You always get stuck on details." Bryant smirked, and Diane tightened her grip on his arm as if showing off a prize. Across the courtyard, the Montgomerys exchanged glances. Lexi's father, Richard Montgomery, leaned slightly toward his wife, whispering something. She observed Diane for a long, assessing moment, the tone, the posture, the performative cruelty, and her expression cooled. Maxwell inclined his head politely. "If that's Liam's choice, I'll support it." Diane blinked, clearly thrown by the lack of outrage. "You don't mind? It's his wedding," Maxwell replied. "Not a competition." Bryant's smirk faltered. Diane's lips tightened, and the Montgomerys watched everything. Dinner unfolded across long, candlelit tables overlooking the estate's lake. Conversations flowed with practiced ease, art acquisitions, political donations, high-yield real estate ventures. But beneath the polished surface, tension coiled like a snake. Diane made sure of it. She spoke loudly, always within earshot of Maxwell. "When Liam was little, he always ran to me first," she said to a group of guests. I was the nurturing one. Maxwell was always just working." Maxwell cut his steak calmly. "And of course," Diane continued, "I was the one who helped Liam with his school applications. Bryant, too, of course. We've always been the ones truly present." Bryant nodded, though he looked uncertain. A few guests offered polite smiles, but even they could sense the insecurity twisting in Diane's voice. At the head table, Lexi slipped into the seat beside Maxwell. "You're really composed," she whispered. He glanced at her with a faint smile. "Years of practice. She's trying to get a reaction." "I know. Liam sees it," she assured him. "We all do." Maxwell didn't reply, but internally he noted every shift, every guest who raised an eyebrow at Diane's comments, every Montgomery relative who exchanged uneasy glances. The more she spoke, the more she revealed. And the more he stayed silent, the more powerful he looked. Later in the evening, as music drifted from the live quartet, Maxwell stepped away to a quieter part of the terrace overlooking the gardens. The air was cooler here, carrying the scent of roses and lake water. He took a rare moment to breathe. Footsteps clattered behind him, uneven, stumbling. Diane. Her hair had loosened, lipstick slightly smudged, glass still in hand though it was nearly empty. "Maxwell," she slurred, leaning heavily against the balustrade. "There you are." He turned slowly, expression neutral. "Diane, you're so calm," she said, jabbing a finger at him. "So cold. Like nothing touches you. Like, you think you're better than everyone." "I think I'm quiet," he corrected. She scoffed. "You're quiet because you're plotting. You always plot." He stayed silent. "That's what you did to Bryant," she said, stepping closer, breath sharp with wine. "Don't pretend you're innocent. You've been sabotaging him for years. You want to see him fail. Admit it." "Diane, admit it," she snapped, voice cracking. Guests nearby glanced over, pretending not to eavesdrop. Maxwell's voice remained smooth. "I haven't sabotaged anyone." Her eyes narrowed with drunken fury. That's bullshit. His accounts went under review because of you. His investors left because of you. His firm's valuation tanked because of... You're drunk, Maxwell said quietly. And this isn't the place. Oh, everything with you is about place. She stepped closer, too close. You ruined my life. You made your choices, he replied. Her breath hitched, either from anger or the truth embedded in the words. You still think you're untouchable, and you still think shouting makes you powerful. She glared, shaking. I know you're involved somehow. I can feel it. Bryant keeps talking about pressure and failed investments, and how nothing makes sense. None of it happens by accident. Not with you around. Maxwell didn't respond, because she wasn't entirely wrong, but she would never, ever be allowed to prove it. Her laughter broke harshly. You love this, don't you? Watching everything crumble around us? You think you're so clever. He met her gaze evenly. I think you should go back inside. Why? So you can look good? She sneered. So everyone can see St. Maxwell Thornton, quiet and dignified, while I'm a crazy ex-wife. He didn't deny it. Her voice softened suddenly, bitterly. You always win. No, Maxwell said quietly. I just don't lose. Her expression twisted, and for a moment, she looked like a woman realizing the game she thought she was winning was never hers to begin with. Go inside, Diane, he repeated. She stared at him, teetering between fury and something close to fear. Then she turned sharply, nearly stumbling as she hurried back toward the glowing courtyard. Maxwell stayed where he was, hands resting lightly on the railing, gaze calm. He had said nothing incriminating. He had denied everything. And internally, he knew what she didn't. The entire collapse was already scheduled. It was almost time. Chapter 5, The Begging of Fraud. 3 weeks before the wedding, Boston was buried under one of those gray late winter afternoons where the sky looked like wet cement and the air tasted like cold steel. It was a quiet day at Thornton Capital. Most of the staff had gone home early due to the weather. The upper floors were silent, lights dimmed, the entire office tower reflecting the gloom of the sky. Maxwell stood in his corner office overlooking the harbor, a phone pressed to his ear as he discussed a logistics deal with a European partner. His voice was steady, unhurried as always. He didn't hear the elevator open behind him, but he heard the panic. Maxwell, please, I need to talk to you. Bryant's voice cracked through the silence like broken glass. Maxwell slowly turned. Bryant stood in the doorway, drenched from the freezing rain, clothes wrinkled, hair plastered to his forehead. He looked like a man running from ghosts. Maxwell ended his call without taking his eyes off him. Bryant, he said calmly, you don't have an appointment. I know, Bryant stammered, stepping inside with the frantic energy of someone whose life was unraveling. I didn't know where else to go. Maxwell watched him with measured patience. Sit. Bryant practically collapsed into the leather chair across from the desk. His hands were shaking, and the wet fabric of his jacket left dark marks on the armrests. Maxwell sat down slowly, folding his hands. Tell me why you're here. Bryant inhaled sharply, as if it physically hurt. It's everything. Maxwell, everything is falling apart. Maxwell didn't offer sympathy. He simply waited. Bryant ran a trembling hand through his wet hair. The Montgomery investment, it's collapsing. The valuation dropped 40% in 2 months. They're threatening litigation. The auditors found discrepancies. And the offshore accounts, he stopped, swallowing hard. Maxwell, the SEC, is circling. Maxwell raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Bryant nodded rapidly, eyes wide with desperation. You knew something was off. I know you did. I should have listened when you warned me last year about over-leveraging. I thought I could fix it. His voice cracked. I thought I could hide it. Maxwell leaned back. Hide what exactly? Bryant squeezed his eyes shut, shame twisting his face. Fraud, okay? Fraud. I siphoned money through shell routes. He opened his eyes again, wet, frantic. I moved company assets into offshore accounts that weren't exactly legitimate. How much? Maxwell asked coolly. Bryant hesitated. Bryant, Maxwell said softly. How much? $8 million, he whispered. What else? Maxwell's voice was calm, but firm. Bryant winced like he'd been struck. And some of it went to someone. Someone, Maxwell repeated. My girlfriend, Bryant finally spat out, ashamed. From Chicago. Maxwell's face remained unreadable. Diane doesn't know. Bryant shook his head violently. God, no. She'd kill me. She already hates me for losing money this year. If she finds out I supported a mistress using company accounts, she will, Maxwell said quietly. Eventually, Bryant's breath shuddered. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, head in his hands. I know, I messed up. I ruined everything. The Montgomerys are pulling out. Investors are calling nonstop. My lawyer said I need a miracle or I'm going to jail. And you came to me, Maxwell said. Bryant lifted his head, eyes red. You're the only one who can help. You still have influence. You have allies, connections, leverage. Hell, half the city's decision-makers owe you favors. You spent years pretending you didn't need me, Maxwell replied. Calling yourself self-made. Acting like the empire you built was built alone. Maxwell, please, Bryant whispered. I'm begging you. I'm begging. If I lose the hedge fund, I lose everything. Diane will leave me. My board will oust me. The Montgomerys will sue me into the ground. The federal charges, his voice trembled. I won't survive that. For the first time, Maxwell stood, and Bryant tensed, like a guilty child waiting to be punished. But Maxwell simply walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. He watched the rain streak down the glass. He listened to the ticking of the antique clock on the wall. He let the silence stretch until Bryant seemed on the verge of breaking entirely. Then he spoke. I can help you. Bryant sagged in relief, so intense it was almost painful. Thank God. Maxwell, thank you. I swear, I'll pay you back. I'll do anything there is, Maxwell said, turning toward him, one condition. Bryant froze. Maxwell walked back to the desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a folder already prepared, already printed, already waiting. He set it gently on the desk in front of Bryant. What is this? Bryant whispered. The only thing, Maxwell said, that will convince my partners and allies to support your firm's recovery. Bryant slowly opened the folder. Inside were crisp legal documents, neatly arranged with signature tabs. His face drained of all color. His voice cracked. You want voting control? Of my company. Maxwell's voice was quiet. If I am to risk the reputation of my firm to save yours, I will need authority. Full voting rights. I won't micromanage your operations, but I will control the decisions that matter. Bryant shook his head, trembling. Maxwell, that's everything. That's my entire company. No, Maxwell corrected softly. It's what's left of it. Bryant looked down at the papers, then back at Maxwell. You wanted this. All these years, you've wanted this. Maxwell didn't blink. In all these years, you assumed I wasn't capable of taking it. Bryant stared in horror and realization, too late. Do you want my help or not? Maxwell asked. Bryant clutched the arms of his chair, breathing hard. If I sign this, I'll have nothing left. You'll have freedom, Maxwell replied. Possibly immunity. Maybe a marriage that survives, if you're lucky. If you don't sign, he paused. You'll lose everything anyway, including your freedom. Bryant's hands shook as he looked at the pen resting beside the documents. He picked it up. His voice wavered. Maxwell, please tell me you're not doing this to punish me. Maxwell leaned forward slightly. I'm doing exactly what you asked for. Helping you. Tears welled in Bryant's eyes. Not emotional tears, but the kind born from sheer terror. Then he signed. Each stroke of his pen was slow, shaky, final. When he finished, he set the pen down, hands trembling violently. It's done, he whispered, sounding hollow. God, it's done. Maxwell took the documents, placed them neatly back into the folder, and closed it with surgical precision. The trap, Maxwell said silently in his mind, is sealed. And Bryant, broken, desperate, unaware of the magnitude of what he'd just given away, leaned back in his chair and exhaled like a condemned man who had just signed his own sentence. Chapter 6, Wedding Morning. Calm before ruin. Morning broke over Boston with a soft, golden haze, an almost cruel contrast to the storm that Maxwell Thornton knew was waiting just beneath the surface of the city. But this morning wasn't about revenge. Not yet. Today was Liam's day. Maxwell stood in his walk-in dressing room, fastening the cufflinks on his charcoal gray suit. No flashy colors, no unnecessary accessories, just the clean precision of a man who understood that power never needed to raise its voice. He adjusted the sleeves, then smoothed the front of his jacket. His movements were steady, unhurried. Every action felt like part of a ritual, measured, inevitable, almost ceremonial. On the dresser beside him was a small velvet box. Inside lay a vintage silver tie clip engraved with 3 tiny initials. LTT Liam Thomas Thornton. Maxwell turned the clip over in his hand, thumb brushing the engraving. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, small, genuine, the kind he rarely allowed anyone to see. "This day is yours," he murmured under his breath, imagining his son's nervous, excited face. "Not mine." As if summoned by the thought, his phone buzzed. "Roman," Maxwell answered, pressing the receiver to his ear. "Morning," Roman said, his voice quiet but buzzing with the electricity of everything set in motion. In the background, Maxwell heard the faint hum of computer servers and clicking keyboards. Roman must have been at one of the safe locations. Status update as requested. Maxwell fastened the tie clip into place. "Go ahead. Evidence package A is primed for the Montgomery family," Roman reported. "Financial statements, offshore routing maps, transaction histories, everything formatted clean, timestamped, cross-verified." "Good. Package B for the authorities is queued. Email servers are loaded, pre-scheduled. One command will push everything directly to the district attorney's office, SEC contacts, and the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit." A beat of silence. Roman added, "Everything's ready, Max." Maxwell straightened the knot of his tie, ensuring it sat perfectly centered. "Good work. And the physical copies?" "In the black case," Roman replied. "Locked. Number code set to your confirmation digits. It's in my car, won't leave my sight." Maxwell nodded once, though Roman couldn't see him. "And Diane and Bryant?" Roman gave a short, dry laugh. Diane booked a $600 hair appointment for this morning and posted 3 feeling blessed photos on social media. At 6 a.m. Bryant hasn't left the hotel suite since last night. His lawyer texted him 6 times. He hasn't opened any. Maxwell didn't respond. Roman's tone softened. "You sure you want to do this today? You could wait until tomorrow. Avoid the scene." "Tomorrow isn't the point," Maxwell replied calmly. "Today is the day all the pieces intersect." Roman exhaled slowly. "Understood. But your son, does he know anything?" "No," Maxwell said immediately. "And he won't. Not a word." "Fair enough." Roman paused. "He's a good kid. Max looks up to you more than he admits." The faint smile returned. "I know. Just make sure the storm touches the right people." "It will," Maxwell answered. "Liam will have nothing but a good memory of today." Roman never questioned him again. "I'll be nearby the hotel. Ping me if you need anything. Drive safe." Maxwell ended the call. He stepped out of his dressing room, crossed his penthouse living room, and paused for a moment at the large window overlooking Boston Harbor. The water reflected streaks of sunlight, shimmering like nothing bad had ever happened there. Like the world was clean. Maxwell breathed in deeply. Calm, measured, certain. He grabbed his coat, slipped into polished black shoes, and headed toward the private elevator. As he rode down from the penthouse, he checked his watch. 8:17 a.m. Liam's wedding would begin at noon, and Maxwell intended to arrive early, before guests, before chaos, before Diane had the chance to make anything about herself. When the elevator doors slid open into the parking garage, his driver, Matteo, was already standing ready beside the car. "Morning, sir," Matteo greeted with a slight bow. "Congratulations on your son's big day." Maxwell nodded. "Good morning." Matteo opened the back door. Maxwell slid in, adjusting his jacket as the car hummed to life and glided out of the garage. Boston swept past the windows, brick buildings, early morning vendors setting up food carts, couples walking dogs, the skyline glittering in the rising sun. A peaceful tableau, unaware of the seismic shift quietly preparing to erupt by afternoon. Maxwell rested his elbow against the door and stared out, deep in thought. He didn't think about Bryant. or Diane, or the years of planning. He thought about Liam. He remembered teaching him to tie his first tie, walking him to school on rainy mornings, sitting in the bleachers at school games, watching him grow into a man Maxwell respected. The thought softened him. This day was not about vengeance. It was about Liam's new beginning. The car turned a corner, approaching the Delancey Grand Hotel, a freshly renovated, expensive venue owned by the Montgomery family, one that Maxwell himself had subtly nudged them into acquiring years ago. The building gleamed with glass and clean architectural lines. The valet staff were already lined up. Floral arrangements were being carried through the entrance. A team of decorators adjusted ribbons and banners along the outdoor arch. It was beautiful, elegant, worthy of Liam. Mateo pulled up to the curb. "Would you like me to wait in the lot, sir?" he asked. "Yes," Maxwell said. "Stay close." Mateo nodded. Maxwell stepped out of the car, the morning breeze brushing against his suit. He looked up at the towering hotel entrance, grand, polished, full of promise. Guests hadn't arrived yet. The place was quiet, peaceful, untouched, exactly how he wanted it. He checked his watch again. 8:42 a.m. He was early. Perfect. He walked toward the front doors, hands in his pockets, expression calm, movements measured, like a man stepping into a chapter he had waited 12 long years to reach. Inside, the lobby was warm, filled with the soft scent of lilies and fresh linen. Staff bustled quietly. A few Montgomery planners were reviewing schedules. Maxwell nodded politely to them, then headed toward the private lounge reserved for the groom's family. He didn't intend to disturb anything. He didn't intend to speak about anything serious. He didn't intend to alter the peace of the morning. This was Liam's day, and Maxwell Thornton had every intention of keeping it untouched, right up until the moment the world forced his hand. Chapter 7. The Entrance Blockade. The hotel shimmered in the morning light, its glass facade reflecting the buzzing excitement that usually surrounds weddings. Guests in polished suits and pastel dresses flowed toward the entrance in clusters, chattering, laughing, adjusting ties, and fixing lipstick. It was supposed to be a day built on elegance, perfect photos, perfect decor, perfect smiles. But the moment Maxwell stepped out of the car and reached the front walkway, a storm brewed beneath the manicured surface. He had arrived early deliberately, not to draw attention, but simply because he didn't want to miss a single moment of his son's big day. He adjusted the cuffs of his charcoal suit and inhaled softly, preparing himself for the usual tension that came with being near his ex-wife. That was when the shrill, familiar voice sliced through the air. "Maxwell!" Head swiveled. The hotel staff glanced up. A few guests stopped walking, sensing drama the way sharks smell blood. Diane stormed toward him like she owned the entire building. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble, her designer gown sweeping behind her like a cape. Her face was tight, lips pressed into a cruel line, eyes blazing with contempt. Before he could greet her, she jabbed a finger into his chest. "You have some nerve showing up here." Maxwell stayed still, expression unreadable. "Diane, it's our son's wedding. I have every right, and no." Her voice shot upward, loud enough to freeze the entire entrance. "You are not invited, loser." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A grandmother covered her mouth. A groomsman exchanged a look with another guest. A front door attendant straightened awkwardly, unsure whether to intervene. Maxwell didn't flinch, though her humiliation was deliberate and brutal. She wanted a scene. She wanted dominance. She wanted him diminished in front of everyone. "Diane," he said evenly, "don't make a spectacle. This isn't about us." "Oh, shut up." She barked a laugh, cold, metallic. "You think Liam wants you here? After everything? After all your pathetic attempts to seem relevant?" Maxwell's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. She stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough that only he, and maybe the first few rows of stunned spectators, could hear. "You ruined everything you touched. You're an embarrassment, and you are absolutely, unequivocally barred from this wedding." She straightened and raised her voice again. Security. 2 uniformed guards approached swiftly, exchanging uncomfortable glances. One of them, a tall man with a shaved head, cleared his throat. "Sir, Mrs. Montgomery has instructed us that you're not on the guest list and that you're to be removed from the premises." Diane folded her arms triumphantly, eyes glittering. "Throw him out if you have to," she said. "He doesn't belong here." The crowd watched, half horrified and half entertained. Max could feel the weight of every stare, the pity, the judgment, the confusion. Liam's college friends whispered. A bridesmaid shook her head. Someone muttered, "Jesus, poor guy." The guard took a step forward. "Sir, if you don't comply, we'll have to escort." Maxwell lifted a hand, silencing him without a single sharp word. "It's fine." He gave Diane one last look. Not anger, not sorrow, just a quiet, unreadable acknowledgement. Then he nodded just once and turned away. A wave of whispers followed him as he descended the steps, but he didn't look back. He didn't rush. He walked with a measured calm that unsettled even the security guards, who had expected resistance or outrage. Diane smirked, adjusting her hair triumphantly as she watched him leave. She had won, so she believed. Maxwell crossed the street and entered the small lobby bar of the boutique hotel opposite the venue. It was dimly lit, quieter, shielded from the chaos outside. A bartender in a vest polished glasses behind the counter, glancing up briefly as Maxwell entered. "Morning, sir. Bar's open, coffee, drinks, whatever you need." Maxwell settled onto a stool. "Water, please." He pulled out his phone and placed it on the counter. His reflection in the dark screen showed no panic, no humiliation, just inevitability. The bartender set a glass in front of him. "Rough day." Max gave a small, almost amused breath. "About to be." He picked up the phone and scrolled through his secure contacts until he reached one labeled Davenport and Fields, private line. He tapped. The line connected in seconds. "Maxwell," his attorney answered. "Has the situation begun?" "Yes," Maxwell replied quietly, eyes fixed on the wedding hotel through the window. Guests were still walking in, blissfully unaware of the storm forming at their doorstep. "It has." "And your final decision?" Maxwell didn't hesitate. Not for a second. "Execute Protocol Omega." There was a brief pause on the other end, a professional silence, not doubt but recognition. At once, a single tap of a key on the attorney's end unleashed a meticulously engineered chain reaction. Maxwell remained seated, expression calm, as the world began to shift. First domino. Encrypted evidence packets containing financial statements, forged documents, shell company chains, mistress-linked accounts, and Bryant's signed confession of fraud were instantly delivered to the Montgomery family's private inboxes. Every board member, every investor, every trust guardian. Second domino. An anonymous tip hit the district attorney's office. A full dossier, time-stamped, validated, undeniable. The DA's system flagged it within seconds. Urgent financial crimes, priority review. Third domino. Internal revenue servers, SEC portals, and corporate compliance systems received mirrored copies of the same data. Each packet was designed to auto-forward if tampered with. There was no reversing it, no burying it, no slowing it down. Fourth domino. Bryant's financial structures, already fragile, were exposed simultaneously to auditors, regulators, and investigative branches. Every hidden account, every phantom transfer, every dollar funneled into his mistress's conveniently unnamed consulting businesses, all of it illuminated in unforgiving detail. Maxwell took a sip of water. No shaking hands, no visible satisfaction, just a steady stillness, the kind that grows only after months of planning, betrayal, and clarity. Across the street, Diane was still preening in her perceived victory. Inside the penthouse bridal suite, the Montgomery family's phones began lighting up with alerts, one after another, screens flashing with documents that would crack open the facade of wealth and stability they had flaunted. The attorney's voice came back on the line. "It's done, Maxwell. Protocol Omega is fully active. There's no stopping it now." "I know," Maxwell said quietly. The bartender glanced over again. "Everything okay, sir?" Maxwell set his phone down with a composed finality. "It will be." He looked once more at the glittering hotel, where a wedding was supposed to proceed without a hitch. But the match had already been struck. and the explosion was only moments away. He sat back, breathing evenly, as the world across the street began to unravel. Chapter 8, 20 minutes later. The bar had grown quiet, almost unnervingly so. 20 minutes had passed since Maxwell had uttered the words that set everything in motion. 20 minutes since his attorney triggered Protocol Omega. 20 minutes since the truth began its merciless march through inboxes, secure servers, and legal channels. Maxwell sat alone, the condensation on his untouched glass of water slowly pooling in a circle on the counter. He watched the wedding hotel across the street through the bar's tall windows. It was no longer buzzing with unbothered excitement. Movement had changed. People were rushing now instead of strolling. Phone screens glowed in tight huddles. Staff whispered urgently. Something was breaking, and it was breaking fast. He checked the time. Exactly 20 minutes. Right on schedule. The bar doors suddenly slammed open with such force that even the bartender flinched. Maxwell, standing in the doorway, was Franklin Montgomery, father of the bride, patriarch of one of the wealthiest families in the state. His face, usually a firm, golf-tan shade, was now a ghostly white. Sweat clung to his temples, and his tie hung crooked as if he'd yanked at it in panic. He spotted Maxwell instantly and stormed toward him, weaving between tables, ignoring startled guests. "You," he bellowed. "What the hell did you do?" The bartender instinctively stepped back, unsure if he should intervene. Franklin slammed both palms on the bar counter. "What did you do?" "The marriage is off." The bar went silent. A couple at a corner table paused mid-sip. Even the bartender held his breath. Maxwell didn't move, didn't flinch. He simply looked at Franklin with a calm that seemed to infuriate the older man even more. "Sit down," Maxwell said quietly. Sit down." Franklin looked moments away from exploding. His voice cracked with panic. "My daughter is upstairs crying her eyes out. Her mother is hysterical. The pastor is threatening to leave, and your little stunt just blew up the goddamn wedding." Maxwell gestured to the bar stool beside him. "Sit. Where are you going to pass out?" Franklin hesitated, swayed even, and then slammed himself onto the stool. His breath came in ragged bursts. He ran a shaking hand through his hair. "What did you do, Maxwell?" he whispered, the anger leaking into desperation. "My God, what did you unleash?" Maxwell rested his folded hands on the counter, his demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos unraveling outside. "Nothing," he said. "I didn't unleash anything new. I just revealed what was already true." Franklin blinked. "What in God's name is that supposed to mean?" "It means," Maxwell began evenly, "that your future son-in-law, Bryant, has been stealing from you." Franklin stared, brows furrowing as though the words were in a language he didn't understand. "He what?" Maxwell turned toward him, tone firm but calm. "Bryant stole Montgomery funds. Millions. And not just recently, systematically, quietly, over time." Franklin's mouth fell open. "He siphoned money through offshore circuits, shell consultancies, and private accounts tied to a woman you'll soon read about in those files." Franklin's voice was barely a whisper. "A woman? A mistress," Maxwell clarified. "You'll find a full payment trail in your inbox, including transfers disguised as investment drift loss write-offs, false operational contracts, and payouts to her so-called startup development firm." Franklin's hand trembled violently as he gripped the edge of the bar. "No, no, no, no." He shook his head, refusing the words. "That boy, he's been part of our family for 2 years. He asked for my blessing. He promised. He said he loved my daughter." Maxwell exhaled, not sympathetically, but with the weight of someone who'd been forced to learn these truths earlier than anyone else. "He might love her," Maxwell allowed, "but he loved himself more, loved the money even more than that. And he was using your family name, your company, to fund a life none of you knew about." Franklin rubbed his forehead, his pulse visibly racing in his neck. "Jesus Christ, is this why the wedding was?" He swallowed hard. "My wife got a text from our accountant. That's why she started screaming. She said something about falsified accounts and irregular withdrawals. I thought he was mistaken, but then the files started pouring in. He grabbed Maxwell's arm suddenly, grip desperate. Why would you do this today? Why blast this on the wedding day? You could have pulled me aside. You could have told me in private. Why? I did this today, Maxwell said steadily, because today was the only day he couldn't run. Franklin froze. Maxwell continued, voice low and logical. Bryant was planning to disappear. He was going to marry your daughter, use the union to shield himself legally, and then bail offshore before anyone could track the missing funds. How do you know that? Franklin breathed. Because, Maxwell said, meeting his eyes, he told me. Franklin gasped. What? 3 weeks ago, he came to me. Desperate. Sweating. Panicked. His whole empire was crumbling. And he confessed everything. Every lie. Every theft. Every dirty route he used to move money around. Franklin looked like someone had kicked the air out of him. He begged me for help, Maxwell added. And you helped him? Franklin snapped, half angry, half horrified. I helped you, Maxwell corrected. And your daughter. And my own son. Franklin stared at him, baffled. By revealing the truth, Maxwell continued. I protected both families from a public implosion later. A scandal that would have tanked the Montgomery name, your company, your reputation, everything. If this came out months into the marriage, you'd have been accused of covering it up. Investors would accuse you of knowing. Your daughter would be dragged through the media as an accomplice. Franklin swallowed hard. Maxwell leaned back slightly, letting the silence settle before finishing. I didn't destroy anything. I prevented a much larger disaster. Franklin looked down at the bar, knuckles white, breath still shaky. His mind raced through the implications, financial, legal, reputational, personal, all of it spiraling in real time. Slowly, very slowly, he lifted his eyes to Maxwell. You saved us, he whispered, voice cracking under the weight of realization. Maxwell didn't nod, didn't smile. He simply held Franklin's stare with a calm firmness. I gave you the truth, he said. What you do with it, that's up to you. Franklin exhaled shakily, the weight of betrayal, shock, and reluctant gratitude settling onto his shoulders all at once. Chapter 9, Conditions of Mastermind. The bar across the street still smelled faintly of polished wood and morning coffee. Maxwell Thornton remained seated, composed, his hands folded neatly atop the counter. Outside, chaos and whispers from the wedding hotel swirled like a storm. But inside, there was a rare calm, a calm deliberately maintained, a calm that belonged entirely to him. Franklin Montgomery sat opposite Maxwell, still pale, still trying to absorb the devastating truths he had just been handed. His tie was loosened, one sleeve slightly rolled up as if the weight of the world had already made it uncomfortable. Sweat clung to his forehead, and every now and then he rubbed his temples as though massaging the knowledge into understanding. Maxwell reached into his inner jacket pocket and produced a small, black flash drive. It gleamed faintly under the dim bar lighting, innocuous in appearance, but monumental in consequence. He set it deliberately on the counter before Franklin. Plug this into your computer, Maxwell said calmly. Everything you need is there. Franklin's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the drive. Everything? What do you mean, everything? His voice was wary but curious. Maxwell leaned forward, elbows resting on the counter, eyes locked on Franklin's. Everything to prove that your daughter, your family, your company, your investments are clean. Every transfer Bryant made that touched your funds has been traced and accounted for. Every dollar that belonged to anyone other than him and his mistress is untouched. Franklin's hands froze over the drive, and his eyes widened. So, Lexi and Liam, they haven't been involved? They are safe? They are clean, Maxwell confirmed. And they will remain so. Nothing here implicates them in anything fraudulent. Nothing implicates the Montgomery family in wrongdoing. Only Brian himself bears responsibility. Franklin exhaled, a mix of relief and lingering disbelief. God, I don't even know how to thank you. Maxwell's voice was quiet, firm, and almost unflappable. You don't need to thank me. You just need to understand one thing. This day can still proceed. Franklin's brow furrowed. Proceed? How? Without Bryant, Maxwell said. He cannot be part of this wedding. Not as long as this evidence exists and the authorities have been notified. His presence will only bring more destruction. Franklin leaned back, blinking, the weight of reality settling into his chest. Without my future son-in-law. Maxwell did not flinch. Without him. The rest, your daughter, Liam, your families, they deserve this day. You can still hold the wedding. Lexi still walks down the aisle. Liam still marries the woman he loves. Franklin ran a hand down his face, processing the severity and the pragmatism. And Diane? He asked quietly, almost afraid to hear the answer. Maxwell's eyes darkened slightly, the first shadow of hardness creeping into his calm. Diane has a choice. She can conduct herself like a guest, or like a wife following a husband who is about to face full legal exposure. The choice is hers. She can walk gracefully today or risk walking with Brian straight into ruin. Franklin swallowed hard, the flash drive now clutched tightly in his hand. She'll hate you for this. Maxwell shrugged slightly, a small motion that betrayed nothing. She already does. That is irrelevant. My concern is protecting those who deserve protection. And, importantly, timing the consequences so that her actions or inactions cannot harm Liam. Franklin's gaze shifted, his mind racing to comprehend the full implications. He looked at Maxwell, the calm, unyielding, icy figure who had orchestrated every move with precision. Every look, every word, every silent pause had been calculated, and he realized, slowly and with some awe, that he was staring at a man who had played a game over decades, who had never lost sight of the end goal. I see, Franklin said softly, almost reverently. You've been planning this for a long time. Maxwell inclined his head. 12 years, precisely. Every step, every patience-tested maneuver, all of it led to today. The timing, the evidence, the protection, it is deliberate. Nothing is accidental. Franklin nodded slowly, the realization settling into his chest like a weight he was suddenly proud to bear. And in the end, you protected my daughter. Liam. Us. All of us. Yes, Maxwell said simply. I ensured that only the guilty bear consequences. That only the responsible, Bryant, faces accountability. Everyone else remains unscathed. Franklin exhaled, running a hand across his jaw. His mind flashed to the bride upstairs, Lexi, blissfully unaware of the near catastrophe. He thought of Liam, the way he had grown, the man he had become. And then he thought of Maxwell, the figure who had quietly ensured this day could still have its joy despite the storm just beyond the glass. You truly are a mastermind, Franklin said, almost in a whisper. A patient, cold, calculated genius. I think I understand the long game now. Maxwell allowed a faint, subtle nod, but no pride colored it. This was not a moment for him to bask in recognition. This was a moment to reinforce understanding, to set the conditions clearly before the next moves. Now, Maxwell continued, gesturing toward the flash drive, you make the necessary preparations. Inform your family discreetly. The wedding can proceed. Lexi and Liam deserve that. Bryant does not. Diane has a choice. Franklin's fingers tightened on a flash drive. And this will protect them? Absolutely. Maxwell's eyes locked on his. It will protect them. If handled properly, no one else will be touched by the consequences of Bryant's actions. No one except him and his mistress. Everyone else walks away clean. Franklin exhaled slowly, the tension draining from his shoulders just slightly. He set the drive down carefully in front of him, as if it were the most valuable object he had ever held. I understand, and I accept your conditions. Maxwell didn't respond verbally. Instead, he observed Franklin as the older man processed the implications of the day, of the evidence, of the protection offered. There was a moment of mutual recognition, a silent acknowledgement that Maxwell had played the long game and that it had worked. Franklin looked up finally, eyes meeting Maxwell's, and in that brief exchange, a tacit agreement was formed. The conditions were clear. The wedding could continue, Bryant would be removed from the equation. Diane had a stark choice, and the families, protected by one man's calculated orchestration, would emerge intact. Franklin sat back, his face pale but resolute. There was no applause, no fanfare, just quiet understanding, respect, and a deep, inward acknowledgement. Maxwell leaned slightly back in his chair, his gaze unbroken. He had done exactly what he intended. The board had been set, the pieces aligned, and all that remained was for others to act according to the parameters he had dictated. Chapter 10: Arrest and Collapse. The lobby of the Delancey Grand Hotel, once a scene of polished luxury and excited chatter, had become a stage for chaos. The crystal chandeliers refracted the morning light across marble floors now marked by hurried footsteps and whispered panic. Guests froze mid-conversation, staff halted in mid-motion, and the wedding planners exchanged wide-eyed, helpless glances. The source of the upheaval was unmistakable. Bryant Reynolds. He was being escorted out, handcuffed, flanked by two uniformed officers. His expensive Italian suit, once perfectly tailored, hung loosely as he shuffled forward, shoulders slumped in humiliation. His face was pale, and the sweat glistening along his hairline betrayed every ounce of fear, desperation, and shame he had carried for weeks. Diane appeared almost immediately behind him, screaming in a shrill, frantic pitch. "Bryant, no, you can't. You don't understand. This isn't fair." Her heels clacked sharply against the marble as she surged toward the officers, arms outstretched. "Stop. You can't take him. He can't. He's my husband. He's mine." Security intercepted her instantly. Two large men placed themselves on either side of Diane, holding her back. She struggled violently, pulling against them, her designer gown ripping slightly at the seams near the shoulders. Tears streamed down her face, mascara streaking in jagged lines. "Let me go. I won't let you ruin him. You have no right," she shouted. Her voice rang throughout the lobby, the combination of panic and fury cutting through the earlier soft murmur of wedding guests. Bryant's eyes darted between Diane and the officers, pleading silently. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For once, he had nothing to say. His authority, his charm, his carefully constructed empire, all stripped away in the span of a few moments. The officers guided him past clusters of stunned guests, past the wedding planners frozen in disbelief, and finally toward the service entrance. He stumbled slightly, glancing back at Diane, then at the Montgomery family standing in a tense line near the center of the lobby. His betrayal was laid bare. The evidence had spoken louder than words. Diane's shrieks grew higher, more desperate. "No, I won't. Let me go. I'll follow him. One of the security men tightened his grip. "Ma'am, please calm down. You cannot interfere. You need to step back." "I don't care," she yelled, thrashing against them, claws of panic reaching for Bryant's arm. "I don't care. This is our life. You can't take it." Meanwhile, Liam Thornton appeared near the center of the commotion, his perfectly tailored wedding suit suddenly feeling like a costume in a nightmare. His eyes, wide with disbelief, flicked between his mother and Bryant, then at the officers removing the man who had, for months, seemed untouchable. "Dad." His voice was barely audible, broken, trembling. What's happening?" Maxwell stepped into the lobby quietly, almost silently. His presence was commanding, yet gentle. He moved with calm authority, parting the startled staff and guests effortlessly, until he reached his son. Liam's shoulders slumped as he looked at Maxwell. This isn't supposed to happen today. This isn't right." Maxwell placed a steady hand on Liam's shoulder. He leaned slightly, lowering his voice so that only his son could hear. "This is not your burden, Liam. None of this touches you." Liam blinked, tears welling in his eyes. "But they're ruining everything. Mom, Bryant, this was supposed to be my day. I don't understand." Maxwell rested his other hand lightly on Liam's arm. "I know, son. I know it's confusing, but it's not yours to carry. Not today, not ever. The consequences you're seeing belong to them, not you. None of it will stain what you've earned, what you've built, or the life you have ahead." Liam swallowed, trying to steady his shaking hands. "But it feels like a disaster. Maxwell's voice was firm yet soft, cutting through the panic like steel. A disaster to some, yes. But to us, it's clarity. You see, Liam, the truth has a way of exposing the guilty. Today, you witnessed justice being served. And in that, there is protection. For you, for Lexi, and for your family. Liam's eyes darted toward Diane, still struggling against security, tears and rage spilling over in equal measure. Then he looked back at Maxwell, searching for a beacon of certainty. Maxwell's calm demeanor, his unflinching presence, anchored him. They're taking him away? Liam asked quietly. Yes, Maxwell replied, eyes still on the officers guiding Bryant through the exit. And that is exactly where he belongs. It is final, and it is correct. Maxwell glanced briefly at Diane, her voice fading slightly as security finally managed to pull her back, forcing her to the far side of the lobby. Her gaze locked with Maxwell's for a fraction of a second, equal parts rage, disbelief, and, perhaps, begrudging acknowledgement. Liam exhaled slowly, trying to absorb his father's words. I thought I'd never see anything like this. Not today. Not like this. Maxwell leaned down slightly, voice soft but commanding. You've been prepared for life, Liam, in ways most don't realize. You know how to endure, how to act with dignity, and how to see the difference between what's yours and what isn't. Today is a test for others, not for you. You've done nothing wrong. You will remember this day for the right reasons. Liam nodded, tears threatening again, but caught on his resolve. I understand, Dad. I think I understand now. Maxwell straightened and gestured subtly toward the entrance, where Bryant had vanished beyond the service door, flanked by officers. Then come with me. This is your day. Don't let anyone else's failures define it. Liam inhaled deeply, letting the chaos of the morning fade into the background, even as Diane's wails echoed faintly in the distance. He followed his father, trusting the quiet certainty that radiated from him. Maxwell's calm was contagious, a shield against the storm. And in that moment, Liam realized that despite the ruin unfolding around them, he would be protected mentally, emotionally, and morally from the disaster that had befallen others. And as father and son moved toward a quieter corner of the lobby, a tentative sense of peace settled over Liam, even in the shadow of public scandal and shattered expectations. Chapter 11. A Wedding Saved. The Delancey Grand Ballroom gleamed with soft golden light. Crystal chandeliers reflected in the polished marble floor, and the faint scent of roses and lilies floated through the air. Guests filled the room, murmuring nervously at first, uncertain if the day could continue after the morning chaos. But slowly, order returned. The staff worked quickly and efficiently, ushering people into their seats, rearranging floral arrangements, smoothing tablecloths, and ensuring that no visible trace of the earlier scandal remained. Despite the tension, the Montgomery family insisted the wedding proceed. Maxwell Thornton stood near the back, quiet and composed as ever. His eyes scanned the room with the precision of a general surveying a battlefield. Every detail, every line of chairs, every flower arrangement had been carefully noted. But today, unlike the years of plotting revenge, his focus was entirely on Liam. He saw him now, waiting at the end of the aisle. Liam's hands were slightly clammy, shoulders squared, chest lifted with a mixture of nerves and pride. Beside him, the best man adjusted his tie, trying to maintain composure, but stealing frequent glances at the crowd. Maxwell stepped forward. His movements were calm, deliberate, measured. He adjusted his cufflinks one last time and then positioned himself beside his son. "Ready?" he asked softly. Liam gave a small nod, swallowing nervously. "As ready as I'll ever be." Together, they began walking down the aisle. The murmur of guests softened into silence, all eyes drawn to the two figures moving with quiet authority. Maxwell's hand rested lightly on Liam's back, steadying him, providing reassurance without intrusion. Diane sat in the last row, her posture rigid, her face pale, mascara smudged from earlier tears. Her hands gripped the edge of her seat, knuckles white. She looked every bit the picture of shattered dignity, powerless in the face of a day she had tried so desperately to control. Her eyes flicked toward Maxwell several times, filled with a mixture of fury, disbelief, and perhaps a reluctant acknowledgement of the man who had orchestrated the morning's events. But Maxwell didn't glance back. His attention remained on Liam, who was now just a few steps away from the altar. Lexi Montgomery waited there, radiant in her white gown, hands clasped in front of her. Her eyes shone with tears of anticipation and joy. She caught Maxwell's gaze briefly and offered a small, grateful nod. He returned it with the faintest hint of a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. The ceremony began. Soft music played as the officiant welcomed the guests. The vows were exchanged in hushed, heartfelt whispers. The room seemed to hold its breath, as if aware that despite the morning's turmoil, this moment, this union, would remain pure, untouched by scandal. Maxwell's presence at Liam's side was both grounding and symbolic. His quiet authority, his unwavering calm, served as a shield against the chaos of the outside world. Every step he had taken over the past 12 years, every calculated move, had been to ensure this very moment could occur without compromise. When the officiant pronounced Liam and Lexi husband and wife, applause erupted. Guests cheered, some standing, some wiping away tears. Liam and Lexi shared their first kiss as a married couple, smiles bright, untainted by the morning's revelations. The reception followed. Tables were filled with carefully arranged meals, floral centerpieces, and soft candlelight. Guests laughed, danced, and toasted to the couple, gradually letting go of the morning's tension. Maxwell lingered near Liam, observing quietly, ensuring the day's joy remained intact. At one point, Liam approached him, stepping aside from a group of guests. His eyes were serious, yet tender, a flicker of curiosity beneath the surface. "Dad," he began gently, voice low enough that only Maxwell could hear. Did you plan all this?" Maxwell studied his son for a moment. The question was loaded, the trust implicit. He nodded slightly. "Yes, Liam, I planned it." Liam's eyes widened. All of it? Even the morning? The chaos? All of it," Maxwell replied calmly, voice steady, unwavering. "Everything. I did it to protect you." Liam took a small step closer, voice tinged with awe and disbelief. Even Mom?" Maxwell's gaze softened ever so slightly. "Even her. I arranged for a trust fund to ensure she is taken care of, so that you, Liam, never have to feel responsible for her actions or her needs. This day, your life, your marriage, it is yours, free from the burden of their mistakes." Liam exhaled, a mixture of relief, understanding, and admiration flooding through him. "You really did all of this for me." Maxwell inclined his head slightly, not with pride, but with certainty. "I will always protect you, no matter what it takes. That has never changed, and it never will." Liam nodded, absorbing the magnitude of his father's words. He looked at Maxwell not just as a parent, but as a strategist, a protector, a man whose patience and foresight had created this safe space for his son amid chaos. The music resumed, laughter swelled, and the reception carried on, filled with joy, dancing, and the celebration of love. But for Liam, the quiet truth lingered. Everything that could have gone wrong had been carefully controlled, orchestrated, and shielded by his father. He glanced at Diane, seated alone at the far end of the room, and then back at Maxwell. He understood now. Everything, every move, every decision, every silent calculation had been for him. Liam felt a mix of gratitude and awe, a profound sense of security that only a father's deliberate protection could provide. And in that moment, amidst music, laughter, and celebration, Liam felt truly free to enjoy the day he had dreamed of, free from the shadow of others' mistakes, free because Maxwell Thornton had ensured it. Chapter 12, Final Checkmate. The ballroom hummed with celebration, a sea of laughter, clinking glasses, and soft music that wrapped around the guests like a warm embrace. The morning's chaos seemed a distant memory now, tucked away behind the shimmer of chandeliers and the polished perfection of the reception. The scent of roses and fresh linens mingled with the subtle aroma of fine champagne. Maxwell Thornton stood near the edge of the dance floor, his hands clasped behind his back. He didn't dance, didn't mingle, didn't join in the festivities. Instead, he observed, a quiet sentinel amidst the joy. Liam twirled Lexi gently, laughter lighting up his face in a way only Maxwell had hoped for these 12 years. The wedding he had protected, planned, and orchestrated to perfection was finally unfolding as it should. His phone vibrated briefly in his pocket. He retrieved it discreetly, eyes scanning the secure message from Roman. Maxwell, the operative's text read, "All matters confirmed. Bryant Reynolds is booked and in custody. Offshore accounts are frozen and under federal scrutiny. Mistress is detained and cooperating with authorities. Divorce papers delivered to Diane." Maxwell allowed himself a small, nearly imperceptible nod. Everything was in motion. Every domino had fallen exactly as planned. There was no misstep, no risk of exposure, no loose threads. Roman had executed every detail flawlessly, as always. He pocketed the phone, his gaze returning to the dance floor. Liam spun Lexi, caught her hand in his, and laughed, the sound so pure, so free of worry or guilt, that Maxwell felt a rare warmth in his chest. This was why he had endured 12 years of quiet planning, 12 years of restraint, of patience, of methodical preparation. Across the room, Franklin Montgomery raised his glass subtly, directing a quiet nod toward Maxwell. The movement was almost imperceptible to the crowd, but Maxwell saw it. In that gesture, Franklin acknowledged everything: the orchestration, the calm authority, the protection, the brilliance. He understood, without a word, that Maxwell had kept the powder keg from exploding and had preserved the sanctity of this day. Maxwell returned the nod in silent acknowledgement, his expression calm, but his mind fully present, observing the flow of the room. He noted the joy, the laughter, the subtle relief in the Montgomery family's eyes. The wedding was not only proceeding, it was thriving. And then he caught sight of Diane. She sat rigid in the back row, dressed immaculately, but her posture spoke volumes. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, followed him across the room. There was no apology, no remorse, no attempt at reconciliation. Only recognition. Recognition of the man who had dismantled her world, piece by piece, with precise calculation and unyielding patience. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and a flicker of something almost like fear, or perhaps grudging respect, passed through her gaze. Maxwell didn't react to her stare. He didn't need to. The point had already been made. 12 years of betrayal, plotting, and silent observation had culminated in this singular moment of justice and protection. He watched as Liam and Lexi glided across the dance floor. The guests clapped in rhythm with the music, a celebration of love untouched by deceit. Maxwell's chest felt lighter than it had in more than a decade. This was the peace he had been working toward, the moment where patience, precision, and strategic foresight finally paid off. He sipped from a glass of water, carefully ignoring the champagne flutes passing nearby. The quiet satisfaction of a plan executed flawlessly did not require celebration. It required observation, understanding, and reflection. He had protected his son, preserved the honor of the Montgomery family, and ensured that only the guilty bore the consequences of their actions. Roman appeared briefly at the edge of the room, leaning in close enough for Maxwell to hear. "Everything is confirmed. Orders followed. No loose ends. Diane received the divorce papers, and Bryant is fully processed." Maxwell inclined his head. "Excellent. That will do." Roman gave a small nod and melted back into the crowd, leaving Maxwell to stand quietly, watching the unfolding happiness around him. The weight of the past 12 years, the anger, the betrayal, the sleepless nights of planning, began to lift, replaced by a clarity he hadn't known in more than a decade. Diane shifted in her seat, clearly unsettled by the visible calm of the man she had underestimated. Her world, meticulously constructed on deceit and manipulation, had collapsed under Maxwell's hands. She was forced to witness the consequences of her choices, powerless to intervene, powerless to reverse the course of events she could not control. Maxwell's gaze returned to Liam, whose laughter rang out above the soft music. His son's joy was untarnished. Liam had no knowledge of the web of plans, traps, and evidence that had been woven around the morning's chaos. To him, this day would remain pure, perfect, and unmarred. That was how it should be. He straightened slightly, letting the tension of years fall from his shoulders. The first genuine sense of peace in 12 years filled him, not prideful, not jubilant, but a quiet, profound calm. The long game was complete. Justice had been served, the guilty punished, the innocent shielded. As Maxwell observed the celebration, the soft hum of music, laughter, and clinking glasses around him, he felt the philosophy he had lived by for over a decade reaffirm itself in the silence. Never forgive, never forget, never fail. It was a truth etched into every choice, every plan, every patient calculation. Today it had held. Today, the world was exactly as it should be. Maxwell Thornton, at long last, allowed himself to simply watch and exist in the moment he had so meticulously engineered. And for the first time in 12 years, he felt complete.